Slap Tech.
You can still game with old laptops. Case in point, this Dell Latitude 5480 from 2017. It can't play games as well as a modern entry-level PC with a Core i3, but this video will show you what to expect for about $250. Here are the specs, and my full review is in the top right corner. Let's get started. 2D games are fine. Here's Moonlighter. I had trouble disabling VSync in some cases. It's not always impossible, but it can be unpredictable. I recommend leaving it set to on in the NVIDIA control panel. Otherwise, you'll get jerky frame rates even if MSI Afterburner is reporting a perfect 60 FPS. Next up is Dead Cells. This pixel art adventure looks fantastic on a high refresh rate monitor, but this laptop can't do more than 90 FPS, so it's best left to 60 Hz. Have no fear, the ghosting on this 1080p monitor is lower than average, so moving pictures like this still look clean and enjoyable. Vampire Survivors can still give some lesser-equipped machines a run for their money, believe it or not. This still isn't a problem for the Dell Latitude 5480 thanks to the dedicated GPU. Even the last 5 minutes of a match, where the screen is filled to the brim with sprites, runs smooth as butter. The first 3D game we'll look at is Hot Shots Racing. This is where we learn that the frame rate counter is a dirty liar. Skips and stutters don't seem to affect the counter, but believe me, there are skips and stutters. And I'm not talking about the previous issue with VSync, it's just not an accurate portrayal of the frame rate. While this is kind of an issue, the game itself is immensely enjoyable nonetheless. Now we're taking a look at Overcooked 2. Having the VSync setting to on in the game itself will make it run at 30 FPS if it can't do a full 60. This stage shifts between 30 and 60, which is kind of annoying, but the game itself is so much freaking fun that I hardly noticed anyway. If it bothers you, try lowering the resolution to 900p because this is already set to low details. Deep Rock Galactic runs decently well. The lobby environment can't get higher than 40 FPS in 720p low details, and facing hordes of creatures in multiplayer is bound to sink performance. In the end, very playable, not the prettiest experience in the world, thanks to the sharply contrasting edges from the simple graphics. Higher resolutions are sorely missed. Kingdoms of Amalur is an oldie but goodie. This RPG runs best in 720p. The details can be left on, but the picture isn't perfectly smooth that way. Taking everything off results in a perfectly smooth 60 FPS, so there might be some room for a couple things, like the texture level or draw distance to stay up, but I can guarantee that leaving it bare is a surefire way to achieve perfection. Modern, low-spec computers might have better frame rates, but the reduced ghosting of the Latitude is an equal trade in my humble opinion. Diablo 3 is very enjoyable in 720p low details. Bumping into mobs of enemies is going to lower the FPS to less than desirable levels, and it will be noticeable and might affect some twitch aiming. Not gonna lie, might be a deal breaker for the more avid Diablo player. If that doesn't scare you away, then increasing the resolution to as little as 900p surely will. That's just a right-up big no-no. Unless you have something against ever reaching 60 FPS, there's just no reason to play like this. Things get a lot more complicated with Valheim. Everything is low or off here, except the grass, which is one tick from the bottom. And don't yell at me about how it's going to tank the frame rate, because I don't care. I'd rather suffer the loss of performance than play this game without grass. The oldest PC game in the lineup, Witcher 2, can still put PCs through their paces. This Latitude is no exception. The graphics can't get any lower, and it struggles to stay over 30 in 720p. Can it be enjoyed? Sure. And it's a good reason to re-explore Witcher 2 instead of playing Witcher 3, which is the same story but about 10 FPS less on average. It might not sound like a lot, but when the counter is so low to begin with, it's the most noticeable 10 FPS difference you can clearly see. Expect it to dip even further in Novigrad and getting into fights with multiple baddies. On to emulators. Surprisingly, GameCube emulation works very well here. It's not absolutely perfect and still likes to pause when loading new assets like textures, effects, or audio, but once everything has been cached, the frame rates can get up to their maximum. Keep in mind this is at native GameCube res. Trying anything above native res is asking for trouble. Dreamcast games run very well as well. Soul Calibur runs perfectly, Sonic Adventure is a little less than perfect since it has more textures and assets to load at one time, but still very playable overall. 3DS emulation is very good, granted a highly compatible game is being played. Mario Kart has quite a bit of stuttering, but is very enjoyable. The resolution also doesn't mind being pumped up to 2x, which enhances the experience very much, and is definitely how I would play 3DS games on this laptop. The older DS system actually doesn't emulate as well as the 3DS. Native resolution is almost perfect with a few skips here and there. Overall, it's much more fluid than the 3DS, but when the resolution is bumped up to even 2x, that's when things start to get a little hairy. If you want your games to run this slow, and Mario Kart DS might even demand it because 150cc is brutally hard, then by all means, crank up the resolution. PSP emulation is just about as good as it can get. Sure, there's some slowdown here and there, but it's still fun. Going above native res is, once again, not recommended. N64 and PSX are equally good at high resolutions. It feels like enhancing the frame rate on the N64 doesn't work as well as it does on modern machines. There are certainly some advantages and it's worth it, but it feels like overclocking the N64 just works better on more powerful computers. And of course, SNES games run beautifully even with shaders enabled. If the VSync settings are on point, frame rates will be perfect, and you'll have a better experience than more powerful laptops thanks to the lower amount of ghosting. If you want a better idea of what the ghosting is like, it's about halfway between a cheap laptop screen and the 300Hz panel on the MSI GE66. If you buy this Latitude expecting something wonderful, you're going to be disappointed. If all you're expecting is a boon compared to a lower quality screen, then you'll be pleasantly satisfied. This has been Playing Games on the Dell Latitude 5480, a cheap gaming laptop that costs around $250 in 2022. This is the perfect companion device if you already have an adequate gaming PC and just want something mobile, or if you can't afford to replace your current machine should something bad happen to it. Once again, I have a full review available for this laptop that I released very recently in 2022 that showcases what it's capable of and what it's not capable of. Check out that if you haven't already. If there are any other games whose performance you're curious about, ask about them in the comments below. I just might be able to answer your question. If I can't, hopefully someone else will. Because this is the internet, and no one ever judges anyone else on the internet. Them's the rules. Okay, maybe more like guidelines. Hey, like and subscribe! Thanks for watching, and you guys, have a good night.